I am Michelle Zuppa. I teach English, and I have a Master of Fine Arts degree in creative writing. So I thought I would share a little bit about writing, and you might want to think of it as a life, as a lifestyle, rather than a career, because it is kind of all-consuming. Does anybody here like to write for fun? Great. So I'm going to give you some ideas about that, both for your personal use and for academic if you want to pursue a degree in writing. Okay, so the first tip I have for you if you're interested in writing is to read. And you have to read like this, all the books, as many books as you can. What does everybody here like to read? Does anybody have a favorite author or genre?
I like John Grisham.
John Grisham, so like crime thrillers. Anybody else? Mark Twain, okay, very different, but it's all good, whatever you like to read. And if you want to be a writer, you really have to read widely, and I recommend that you read things, all of these types of books. I've got some examples up here. This first one, Girl, Woman, Other, just won the Booker Prize, which is a very prestigious award for writers. She shared the prize with Margaret Atwood for The Testaments, the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale. Classics like A Tale of Two Cities. Did anybody read some of those classic novels in high school? No? You might want to familiarize yourself with. Yeah, exactly. That kind of book is really good to have in your repertoire. Writers will reference all kinds of books. Sometimes they make allusions to other books. Another thing that you might want to study if you are interested in publishing your work are what are called literary journals. And we have one here at Western, the Boar's Tusk, and we are currently looking for submissions from our students in the community. So if you have a poem, if you have a story, if you have an essay, you can, or a photograph, you can submit it to Boar's Tusk. And you can also look at the literary magazines from other schools. This is the Kenyon Review, which is a very well-respected literary journal, and they will publish stories, they will publish poems, essays, artwork of all kinds, and you can read those to get a sense of what's current, what's being published right now, the writers who are going to be writing critically acclaimed books in 5 years are right now probably being published in literary magazines. So that's a good thing to study. You might also want to study books that are really popular that you might just enjoy reading. Game of Thrones, has anybody read Game of Thrones or seen the TV show?
I briefly read it.
Briefly read it. So it's like well, he's not even done with it yet. He started in 1990 or something. It's a 7-book fantasy series set in like a medieval fantasy world with dragons, but it's hugely popular. There are writers who are making a living making YouTube videos analyzing his books. That's how popular it is. So I feel that as a writer, we should always kind of know what's making the bestseller lists. The New Yorker magazine, has anybody heard of the New Yorker magazine? So this is kind of, in the United States, one of the most prestigious literary journals. They publish fiction. This cover is from their most recent fiction edition. They also publish poetry and award-winning journalism that's kind of long-form journalism that goes into a lot of depth. And there are Best American collections. This cover is for essays, but they have one for fiction as well, for things like mystery stories. So you can check these out. Janice has copies up in the library, and this too will give you a sense of what's what's being published now, who the writers you might want to know about are, and submit to,
Michelle?
yeah.
Will you let people know about the Boris test?
Oh, I thought I said that first. Yes,
No,
we,
no, no. If someone in first year submits an essay, we'll count that as an event.
oh, great. Did everybody in first year get that? Submit an essay to the Boris Tusk and it will be counted as an event. I will mention that on Wednesday as well. Thanks, Stacy. Okay, so there's a photographer named Jill Cremens who takes pictures of writers at their desks. This is one of my favorite writers, Amy Hempel. She's known for writing short stories, and not many people get well known for writing short stories, so that's how good she is. Her work is sometimes included in anthologies that you'll read in English classes. Has anybody ever read the story The Harvest or In the Cemetery where Al Jolson is buried? So those are her works, but I put her on here because I'm going to talk about the importance of having a space, and also I wanted to ask all of you, what kind of writers made you want to write? Does anybody have an author that made them want to write? Yeah.
Well, I kind of got into it when I was reading Stephen King's Eyes of the Dragon when I was a kid, because he was always known for horror, but then he put out this really great fantasy novel, and I really kind of liked how he could have multiple, genres from the same author. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. Stephen King.
I like the author David Felser.
David who?
David Felser.
Dave Felser?
He wrote the series A Child Called It.
Oh, okay. I've heard of the book. I haven't read it.
Very inspiring.
Yeah. And for a lot of us who write, we had some writers who really kind of said, wow, this is amazing and I want to do that. So it's always good to go back to that sometimes, especially when it gets hard or you need a little inspiration. So as you're reading, you want to start to read like a writer. And what I mean by that is to examine the books you're reading closely. Pay attention to things like how they're structured. Pay attention to things like the language that's being used. Pay attention to things like how the characters are different from each other. Pay attention to things that surprise you. Pay attention to words that are repeated. Look for things like multiple meanings. If you can start to do that and start to pick apart what you're reading, you'll start to get a better understanding of how writing is done, how books are structured. Another great thing to do if you are interested in writing is to keep a journal or a notebook, and even just a little thing like this you can get even smaller ones that'll fit in your pocket. You can, if you're carrying a little journal around and you have an idea, you can write it down right away. J.K. Rowling came up with the idea for Harry Potter while she was riding on a train. She said the 3 characters came to her mind right away. And I don't know if she had a notebook like this, but I know that I often have ideas, and if I don't have a notebook with me, I don't remember them later. And this could be something as simple as an image or maybe the idea for a whole novel. So it's really a great thing to do, and you can also get into the habit of just kind of eavesdropping on people if you're waiting in line. I was serving chili at Sidekicks on Saturday, and a man came in and he said to his wife, I wish we had a ladder like that in the library. I would go there more. They have, the bookshelves up to the ceiling and the ladder that, and his wife looked at him and said, you would fall off. So, you catch little snippets of dialogue and it might give you an idea for a story, or it might make your own dialogue a little bit more true to life. So keep a notebook. And I want to tell you, there's a saying in writing that if you have survived your childhood, you know enough about life to be a writer. You all have plenty to say. You can all do it. My advice, if you're not sure how to get started, if you're writing fiction, start with the character. Start with a character who wants something. If you're writing poetry, start with an image. And you can do a lot just on your own. And one of the most important things to being a writer is that you have to find the time to write. You have to make the time to write. If you don't do that, it doesn't matter how insanely talented you are, you're never going to get any writing done. You have to spend the time in the chair. Some people like to write in coffee shops. I thought I would include this little funny image. J.K. Rowling wrote a lot of Harry Potter in coffee shops. And she stated in interviews that she uses the word ruthless when she talks about the importance of making that time for writing. Don't let people interrupt you, because they will. Don't let yourself be interrupted, especially if you're working on a computer and you want to check out Facebook or whatever else distracts you online. Don't even get blindsided by researching your story. Make yourself write. Make yourself put words on the page. And that's how you get things done. And if you think about it, if you could write 1 page a day, you would have 365 pages a year. Depending on the size of your novel, that could be 2 novels. Now, not every page you write is going to be perfect. You'll probably have to do some revision. But still, writers like Stephen King, Joyce Carol Oates have been writing 2 or more novels a year for 30 or 40 years. Think about how much you can do if you really put your mind to it and develop good habits. And there are 2 main schools of thought when it comes to taking on something like a novel. One is the as-you-go method, where you just start writing and you keep writing. The novelist E.L. Doctorow has a quote that if you're driving at night in a fog, you can only see as far as your headlights are illuminating, but you can make the whole trip that way. George R.R. Martin talks about cultivating, about some writers being gardeners who cultivate and prune as they go along. So you don't have to know your whole story before you sit down to write it. You can just start. Of course, there are writers who prefer to plan ahead. This is a picture of J.K. Rowling and her spreadsheet from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. And she's got it, you can't see everything here, but it's outlined by month. And one of the things I love about Harry Potter is that the boarding school system and the school year gives the book series so much structure. And it, she's got this pattern and she uses it in every book, and it works really well. And here she's got the month, and then she's got different aspects of the story, relationships, things like the prophecy, things like the Order of the Phoenix. So she's keeping track of all these different things that are happening in her story. And probably if your story is large and complex, this kind of thing is really helpful. George R.R. Martin does not do this, and he's got that 7-book gigantic, every book is like 700 pages. And he actually has people who are keeping track of his story for him because, but anyway. So these are different approaches you can take. And then after you start to do some writing, you don't want to stay in isolation. You want to find other people and you want to learn more about your craft. So some ways you can do this are by joining a critique group or a writer's group. You can, look around online and try and find one. or you can start your own. Coltrane, Sidekicks are fantastic writerly places for things like that. You can take, a non-academic class. Jessica Dean is currently teaching a creative writing community education class in Green River, and we'll probably offer different ones in the future. She's focusing on poetry and memoir. There are a lot of online classes that you can take if you have stuff going on and you want to start getting some feedback to help make it better, to make it more likely to find a publisher or an agent. Things like the Gotham Writers Workshop and Writers Digest magazine have classes. You can also take just one writing class at a community college or a four-year college without being in a degree program. You'll probably have to pay for it, but it won't be that much money. Another thing you can do if you're just working on your own and you want to keep writing, there are many excellent books about how to be a good writer, how to get started, how to hone your craft. One of them is called Bird by Anne Lamott. And sometimes in my composition classes, I bring in an essay called Shitty First Drafts. Has anybody ever heard of it? I know Kyle has. That's from this book, and she goes through, and one of the things I really like about this book is that she's very aware of one of the things that really holds a lot of writers back, which is kind of this inner critic that makes you hate every word that you put down on the page. So things like understanding that as long as I can get a draft down, then I can figure out what's working and make it better are really useful tips. Other things are getting that support. Stephen King, he and his wife were struggling before he published Carrie, his first novel. He was teaching English at a private school in the 1970s, which paid nothing. They didn't have a phone in their house, and they were both working, and they had 2 little kids. But his wife was so determined to make sure that he protected his writing time that when he got the opportunity to coach the debate team and make a couple $100 extra, she told him no. She said, we will get by without that money, you save your writing team. And she also took the first pages of the novel Carrie. Anybody read Carrie? Ever seen the movie? She found them in the trash can and she read them and she said, you have something here. So getting feedback can also really help keep you on track, that support, that advice. So all of these things are excellent. And I'm not going to go through all these links for time, but there's something called National Novel Writing Month that happens every November, and it's free. All you have to do is sign up for it. And basically you commit to writing about 1,500 words a day. And at the end of the month, you'll have about 60,000 words, which is a short novel, and that'll be your bad first draft that you can make better. So that's a cool thing you can do. Submittable is a platform for submitting to literary journals. A lot of times there is a small fee with it, but a lot of journals nowadays don't take paper submissions anymore. When you check out magazines, you'll want to see if they'll let you mail it in or if they insist you use this electronic submissions format. But it's nice for you too, because then you have a record of every place you've submitted. You don't accidentally submit twice. And you do have to submit a lot. It's very competitive. The first story you send out is probably not going to get taken, but if you keep at it and you keep getting better, then you'll start to get some publications. And if you get into literary journals, you might get noticed by a literary agent who says, hey, I'd like to see more from you. A website called Query Shark is written by a literary agent, and she critiques query letters. So if you have that novel and you want to get it published, you have to send in a letter where you tell the agent or publishing house what the novel is about. So she provides this service to the community free of charge to help you understand how query letters are supposed to be. And if you have that novel, it's really useful to know how to do that. So that link is here. And then the local Wyoming writers, I've also linked that. They have a conference every summer. I went last year and it was very useful. And on the last day, they had a panel of writers and agents. Everybody who submitted a first page, they would read the first page of people's novels or stories, and then the agents and writers would give feedback. So it was a really cool thing to watch. I didn't get mine in on time, but some of the other people, you have to get there early and you have to hand that paper to them when you register at the hotel, or yours won't get read because it's a really popular thing. Anyway, this is local and this is a cool thing to do. Okay. Now, I've been talking about just kind of being a writer on your own and learning more about it by doing and reading and studying. But you can also get degrees in writing, academic degrees. And at the master's and PhD level, you can even get funding for your degree. When I went to my MFA program, I did not pay for tuition and I was paid to teach in the program. So I did not have to take out a lot of loans. And if you want to do this, this is the way to go, because you're not necessarily going to make a lot of money with your Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing until you start selling books, but okay. So academic programs tend to focus on literary works, and I've been mentioning a lot of popular works, but when you start taking college classes in writing, there is generally an expectation that your works will be literary in nature, and that means, number one, the language is elevated, the prose is just gorgeous usually. It also means that the works are complex and they're trying to reveal truths about the human condition. The characters are real and they're flawed, they're not stereotypes, they're not, the hero and everything wraps up neatly. They're more human than that. Sometimes my students in creative writing classes will ask, why is everything we read so depressing? Except I don't see it that way, because it's always mixed in with beauty. It's always mixed in with things that are true and things that are humorous. And anyway, so this is a particular, this is maybe a style of writing that you're not used to, but you might like it if you read more of it. So this is what academic programs are generally focused on by and large. And you can pursue academic study in writing on all levels, starting at the community college all the way through the PhD. And here at Western, we offer these courses. We don't offer them every semester, and they don't always fill, but we do offer them, so be on the lookout for them, and you'll help them run if you take them. Barb Smith, who used to be the chair of the humanities division here, teaches a memoir class at Young at Heart, and I love going to their readings at the end of the semester because she has a lot of seniors who tell stories from their lives, and they're just fascinating. But she also gets younger people in her classes too. You don't have to be 60 to write a story from your life and have other people enjoy it. And this is our creative writing certificate. So the only required course is publishing your work, and that teaches you how to submit and other things along that line in real detail. Creative writing is an introduction, so you'll cover all the genres. And then you can focus in poetry or prose. We offer 2 levels of each, and you can also take the memoir class and the journaling class. The journaling class is kind of focused on what I talked about earlier, keeping journals so that you can do creative work and also reading journals. And there's a lot of literature that is in journal form, like the Diary of Anne Frank and many others. So we have stuff here. You don't have to go anywhere else. You can also, after Western at the undergraduate 4-year level, you can get either a BFA, a Bachelor of Fine Arts, or a BA in creative writing. And the difference between the fine arts degree and the regular arts degree is that the fine art degree will make you write more, where the Bachelor of Arts will probably have more study of literature. And you can also get a degree in English with a minor or concentration in creative writing. And that one will be a little bit more literature and a little bit less writing. And all of these are degrees that you can kind of use to, if you don't want to just be a writer or you think you might need a day job, you know, you can get a law degree, you can get an education master's and teach at a high school, with English in particular. You can do things like advertising and marketing. So it's not a useless degree, although if you tell your parents you want to do it, they might say that. Okay. The graduate level, though, is where things start to get even more interesting. So the Master of Fine Arts in creative writing is the one where you're probably going to get full funding if you can get accepted to a program that will do that for you. And it's essentially 2 years where you get to focus on developing yourself as a writer, developing your voice, writing. You'll write a master's thesis, which will be a collection of stories or a novel or a collection of poems. It'll be a book-length work. Sometimes people manage to publish them, sometimes they don't, but it's 2 years of really, this is my life. I am a writer now. You can also do an MA in English, which with, again, a concentration in creative writing. You probably won't find it as easy to get funding for that, although you can get some. Part of the funding comes from these students, these graduate students become graduate assistants or teaching assistants, and they're out there teaching composition in the university's writing program. And you can get a PhD. And a lot of people I know do this after the MFA because they want to stay in the academic world. The PhD is going to take you longer than the master's. Usually it'll be about 3 to 5 years. You'll definitely write something major like a novel during that time, maybe even more than one. And you will also study literature, but it'll be directly related to your own writing, and you'll get to, kind of choose what you're going to focus on. For instance, a friend of mine writes fairy tale retellings and folkloric fiction, and she studied folklore as part of her PhD. And this is a picture of a workshop at the Iowa Writers Workshop. So this was the very first master's in creative writing program in the United States, and it was the start of what's called the workshop model. And most academic courses will have some kind of workshop component. This will get more focused on workshop as you go along. But workshop is basically like a really intensive peer review. And when we do peer review in English classes, how many of you have done a peer review in English? All of you, most of you. Everybody brings a draft and you trade with the partner or two. But when you do a workshop, you write usually like a novel chapter or a short story or a poem or maybe 3 poems, and you share them with the class ahead of time usually. Sometimes they're read right in the class, but the whole class is focused on discussing your work for either the whole class period, or it might be a 3-hour class that does 2 or 3 people, but it's really intensive. So, and it's really useful. It's useful for a couple of reasons. One is the structure, right? When you have to produce work for workshop, you have to put something on the page. And if you're like me, sometimes when you're writing and everything is garbage and you don't want to commit to it, but you have that deadline, it's not as perfect as you wanted it to be, but here it is. I've done something, and then you get feedback on it and you revise it more. Now, they do also have classes where you study the craft of writing and literature in MFA programs, but they are studio focused, so you get a lot of time to devote to your writing, and that's the real benefit of them. You're not necessarily going to be coming out of the MFA with the job, but you really get the chance to grow as a writer. And this kind of summarizes the benefits. You know, even if you're writing on your own and you're going to school or you're working, writing is never the first thing you can pay attention to, right? You have to go to work, you have to do your homework, you have to watch your little brother, you have kids, right? But if you're in an MFA program, you get to make writing your very first order of business every single day, and that's great. I just mentioned the importance of structure and deadlines, especially when you're new at it, and the feedback, and just being immersed. Your whole life is writing while you're in these programs. Everybody you're talking to is a writer. You know, you're approaching it at such a different level than when you're just kind of doing it and you're telling your friends about it, but they're not writers, so they don't know. And you get to meet, most schools will have both a literary journal and a visiting writers series. So you get to meet all these excellent writers, maybe some you've heard of, maybe some that are new to you, but you get to talk to people who are out there doing it, and it's great. And you also, many schools will send you to conferences, like there's a giant conference every year with like 1,000 people called the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. So I always enjoy going. If you've been in a program, you know so many people, you get to see them. There's a giant book fair where you can see all the different literary magazines and talk to editors. You get to talk to small presses who are publishing outstanding literary work. So and there are just so many readings. Okay, so this is not a degree to be entered into lightly, however. And one of the things I really want to stress is that if you do want to do this, I think it's a great thing to do, but you don't want to pay for it. You do not want to take out $30,000 in student loan debt to get a fine arts degree of any kind, whether it's in writing or photography. You can make a career, but it's not the same thing as getting an MBA where you're probably going to get a job that's going to help you pay back those loans right away. You're probably not. You'll be qualified to teach, but there are a lot of teachers around at the college level right now. I was what's called an adjunct for 5 years, which means I taught part-time. And it's not going to guarantee that your book will be published if you do write a book during your MFA period. You know, your professors will probably know people who can help you, but it's not an automatic thing. And it's really up to you, and this is probably true of any academic program. It's not going to do anything for you unless you put in the work and make the time. The piece of paper alone won't get you very far. And there are different size programs. Mine was very small. We had 10 fiction writers and 10 poets. So if you don't get along with everybody, it can be awkward and maybe not as worthwhile as it is if you do get along. But even though we had some tensions in my program, I still have friends from this who will read my work and send me their work. And so it was a great experience. Okay, so now I'm going to take you through some resources you can use. And this is something to look for if you're interested in programs. And if anybody wants this PowerPoint, just let me know and I will email it to you. So it's telling you how to check out the curriculum, how to check out the faculty, what kinds of things that you should make sure you have before you decide to spend your money on a program like this at any. This one is focused on bachelor's degrees, but it's true at any level. And then this is a good link for writing in general, not just for writing programs. But if you're interested, you can check these out by state, both at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level. You can also find out about conferences, calls for submission. So that's when a magazine says, we're taking work now. You can find out how to submit there. Writing contests. So I mentioned earlier that publishing your work is competitive if you're writing short stories or poems. But magazines, journals will have contests that you can enter. Usually there is a small fee, but the benefit of the contest is that there's usually a smaller pool of applicants to compete with. So it might be worth your while to enter contests. I know when I was new in my MFA program, we were all doing contests and then we got sick of paying the fees. But anyway, so, and then you can see links are here, the Young Writer's Guide. That's from kindergarten all the way through young adulthood, so you might want to check that out. And this is another link I'm going to show you. But this is a great website. It has excellent resources, and you can also use it to check out programs you might want to apply to. And the University of Wyoming has an MFA in creative writing. So, and if you're doing your undergrad, your bachelor's degree at a school that has the MFA program, you're going to get a lot of those benefits, like the writing series and the chance to work on a literary magazine if those are at the school. So this is a way to learn more about programs you might want to apply to. Now this is from the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. And this one, you can sort it by region. So let's do Western. And it breaks the programs down into type. And at the MFA level, we have both residential programs. So that means that the classes are at the school, right? You're going in person. A lot of times you will have to move, which depending on your point in life might be a huge problem or might be a great thing. They also have what are called low residency programs, and this is kind of a hybrid between an online program and an in-person program. Usually they'll meet for a couple weeks, maybe in the summer, maybe twice a year, and you get to do some workshopping in person and you get to meet your classmates, and then the rest of the time you'll be writing and turning in work online. So it's a nice compromise if you can't move or you have a good job and you don't want to give it up, but you do want to go to school. And online, of course, is a good option if you want to go to school. The thing is, though, that these online and low residency programs, you're not going to get funded for them usually. Usually you get funded when you're at the school and you can do something for the school, either assisting the program or teaching composition. And I really like this one because it lets you search by genre. So most of the time you're going to have literary work, either fiction, poetry. Creative nonfiction is like personal essays or true stories, but that are using the techniques of creative fiction writing. So they're very well written, but they're not made up. Playwriting and screenwriting. And a lot of people do go to Hollywood after they get an MFA. Hollywood is a place that actually hires writers TV shows and movies. It's not an easy thing to do, but it is out there. You can also do things like criticism and theory, translation, and there are a few programs that will teach you how to write things like fantasy or science fiction is on the, some people consider it literary, or I guess I would consider some science fiction to be very literary and some of it not to be so literary. But there are programs that will let you do things like detective thrillers and crime novels and fantasy and romance, which those books all have strong markets. People like to read them. So if that's what you're interested in, you can sort by that. And they also have here professional writing. So if you like to write, but you don't want to be creative or you want to have a job when you're done, the professional writing degree will prepare you for a job in a way that the creative writing won't. Some employers will like it because businesses do need people who can write, but some of them will look at you and say, well, you're not going to stay here. So anyway, these are different things you can do, and then you can pick what you're looking for, whether you're at the bachelor's level or the master's level, or you don't have to look because if you're at the associate's level, because you can take classes here at Western. But this is a great site if you want to study and research programs. And then I'm also going to take you to Poets and Writers magazine. And like New Pages, this is a good resource for writing in general and not just for these programs. And you can see information on publishing your writing, promoting your writing. So if you do get a book published, you have to help it sell. They don't really do that for you anymore. Finding people in your community, readings and workshops. So this is really useful. And they also publish this guide, this index to the MFA programs. So you can kind of look at them at a glance. And there are over 200 programs in the US where you can get an MFA. So you do want to do some homework, and they're very competitive in terms of getting into the program and getting full funding. And the competition is based on the writing sample you provide. They might be asking for other things, like the GRE, some do, some don't. A lot of them will ask you to submit an English type paper because they're going to have you be teaching composition most likely. But the thing that's going to get you into the program or not get you into the program is your writing. They don't really care about your grades. Most of the time they don't care about your GRE scores. They care about that short story you gave them or that novel chapter you gave them or those poems you gave them. So you can use this index to figure out, and this is also geographic. This is a PDF file. And then what you want to do when you look here is, how old is the program? Is it brand new? It might not last if it's brand new. It's going to tell you what genres. So PF&N is poetry, fiction, and nonfiction. This is a 2-year program. Some of them are 3-year programs. And you can see if they fund all their students or not. So you might use this first to check out what programs you want to go to. And there's a whole list here of different genres that are taught beyond poetry and fiction, including television writing, travel writing. So while there aren't a lot of those types of programs, they are out there. And then once you've used this list to figure out, by the way, this is cost of living, so VVH is very, very high, places like Boston. Anyway, so once you've figured out which ones you want to go to and you've narrowed your list a bit, you can start looking at the actual entries for each school. And here you can see the faculty. And you really want to read the faculty's work before you go to a program. And if there's a writer you really want to work with, you want to make sure that they're there. A lot of times writers will go on sabbatical, or if they're really famous, like Amy Hempel, or they don't teach every semester. They're given a very low teaching load so that they can keep writing because they're a star. So you want to make sure that that person is going to be there if you're applying to that person, to that program just for that person. You also want to talk to some students in the program before making up your mind. But this will help you research. This is, more information than the little chart. And the next step would be to go to the actual website for the school. And then finally, here is a list of questions that you might want to ask yourself before you decide to commit to either a bachelor's or graduate degree in writing. So I'm going to stop here since it's 12 minutes to. Does anybody have any questions? Drew?
Regarding the writing certificate here, how long is that program? Is it like a year or?
It's 15, right now it's 15 credits. We're actually looking at maybe reducing the number of required courses so students can get it faster.
Can we repeat his question, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Drew asked how long the creative writing certificate here at Western is.
Are there courses in there that you think would be suitable to take currently to speed along the process, or?
For yourself as a writer?
Yeah, like if you're going to take all those courses for the certificate or whatever, because there was some that was like, 1 and 2, there was like 2 different courses for the same subject.
Oh, okay.
So there
Yes.
were like 3 of those, so could you like take some of those concurrently instead of like having to do the first one and the second one?
Yes,
and then the
absolutely.
first
So,
and
so you could take, so Drew is asking whether you have to take all the courses on the creative writing certificate in sequential order. And the answer is no. You want to start probably with the introduction to creative writing. And after that, you could take fiction and poetry at the same time, or you could take fiction and memoir at the same time, or journaling and poetry at the same time. So you can definitely move through that certificate faster. You could take publishing your work with any of them. You could work on the Boar's Tusk while you're taking any of the classes. So great question. Thank you, Drew. Anybody else?